Test. Cool. Hello, test. Well, my other work, there's a lot more crisis and stress, so this is walk in the park.
Good morning. morning, everybody. Yeah, I'll introduce myself. Stephanie's got one, and this saloon. She's ready. Good morning. I'm Libby. It's my husband, John, and we are going to lead us in discussion this morning. But before we start, let's just quickly open with a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you for this time together. Thank you for this notion of revolutionary love in our lives, in our midst. We need it so much right now. There are so many things happening in our nation, in our world, in our community that require us to reevaluate how we love each other. So bless our conversation this morning, our time together. We're grateful for this church and the opportunities they provide for us to really think about these important, crucial issues. In your son's heavenly name we pray. Amen. So last week, Sam and Lane started us off beautifully talking about this revolutionary love concept and just giving us a little bit of an intro into Valarie Kaur through her TED Talk. Today, did anybody listen to the two podcasts? It doesn't matter. Great. A few of you did. We've. That's right. Raise those hands high. We'll go over some of the high points this morning. But the thing I want to emphasize about this, so if you want to go back and listen, the interview that she does with Rainn Wilson, Soul Boom, which is I think the podcast that actually our Connections class is really focusing on this during this time period. She talks with him about this concept of revolutionary love, which is how she has termed the love that she is she uses the birth analogy for those who are excluded from that, having not personally experienced it. It's really the labor of it, the difficulty of it, how it's hard, and it's something that's very active, and it requires a physical choice, a mental choice. She discusses her faith, her Sikh faith, the role of being a warrior, a sage warrior, and she talks into just the courage that we need to love in these extreme times of fear and hate and political division. And what's so interesting is that when she did a lot of these talks, how much has continued to happen in our nation over the time period, how much more. I can't wait to hear her talk because undoubtedly, she's going to have even more to share and help us through these challenging times. The other interview she does, if you ever want to go back and listen to it, is one with a friend of hers, Reverend Jackie Lewis. Reverend Lewis has written a book called Fierce Love, and in the chapter that she's focusing on when she's talking to Valarie, it's on downsizing the burdens we carry. But ultimately, they get into a discussion of beloved community and how it is to come together, that is the destination we're all trying to reach. So I want to start us off Valarie talks in both about her Sikh faith and the concept of what that is. And there's a prayer that they say, it's called, I'm going to mess it up, it's Ink Onkar, which is oneness ever unfolding. It's described as the root of her faith. It's a concept of being one with everyone in the world, one with all of humanity, all of everything that you see, not just people, but every living being, every living thing, and knowing that you're part of everyone and everyone is part of you, everything is part of you. You can look on the face of anyone or anything around you and say, you're already a part of me that I just don't know yet. And if we're all part of one, then there is no one outside of our circle of care. No one, nothing. We're all part of each other. Yeah.
So this is from the
No, go. Yeah.
This is from the podcast she did with Rainn Wilson. And Rainn Wilson, I'm assuming he's Dwight from The Office. He's got this great podcast called Soul Boom, and he talks about spirituality and everything and all its facets. But this is a video, but we can't pull it up on the PowerPoint. But the audio is fantastic, so you're not missing anything except being able to see her talk. So.
You'll hear.
There's no essential separateness between you and me, between us and other people, even between us and other species, or even us and like this glass of water. You are no more or less worthy. And that means if we're all part of the one, that there is truly no one outside of our circle of care. That is the heart of the Sikh faith. Guru Nanak saying, if you wish to play the game of love with me, step forth with your head on your palm. Is this kind of one, this kind of oneness, and this kind of love that it inspires, it is dangerous business. Papaji used to say, love is dangerous business. Because if I see you as my sister, my brother, my kin, then I must be willing to stand up for you when you are in harm's way. I must be willing to fight for you. So the model in the Sikh faith became the Sant Sipahi, the sage warrior. The warrior fights, the sage loves. It's a path that I call revolutionary love. There's no...
So you hear her talking about this notion of fighting, of being a warrior, of fighting for love in a way. And one of the things we wanted to do this morning is to think about it in our own faith tradition. This notion of being a warrior, of preparing ourselves for the battle of loving fiercely, loving in a revolutionary way. So from Ephesians 6:10 verses 10 through 18, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his power, put on the whole armor of God so that you may be able to stand against this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. Stand therefore and belt your waist with truth. Put on the breastplate of righteousness and lace up your sandals in preparation for the gospel of peace. With all of these, take the shield of faith with which you will be able to quench all the flaming arrows of the evil one. Take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. Pray in the Spirit at all times in every prayer and supplication. To that end, keep alert and always persevere in supplication for all the saints. Another thing Valarie talks about is what it means to be Sikh, this notion of seeking the truth, and leading from being this concept of warrior, which I think is very parallel to our own faith tradition. I mean, this thought of, and I love the image of putting it all on. Like we were just talking this morning, Leslie was talking about going to this march yesterday, the No Kings, and when you step out, and you're putting on sort of this figurative armor, to prepare yourself for whatever comes your way. To me, it gives you sort of strength for that journey, right? And I love how she talks about that in her own faith journey.
Sikh simply means seeker or student of truth. And the idea was that this oneness that he's saying of, which is really the heart of all the mystical traditions, that are all part of each other, could be experienced in the body. You don't have to think it, you can feel it. You can let your body resound with that truth when you give yourself over to music and to poetry and to song.
So seeking truth, we certainly have that in our word, right? Ask and it will be given to you. Search and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened. For everyone who asks receives, and everyone who searches finds. And for everyone who knocks, the door will be opened. Going at the world with this thought of seeking truth, seeking beauty, seeking love. So she talks so much about revolutionary love. Her book, See No Stranger. Who's read the book? And yeah, I know it's long. I know life happens in the midst. You had the whole thing, didn't you? Yeah. So, but it's incredible. I mean, did you find as you were reading it that your thoughts on love changed?
It was very aligned with.
She's coming to you.
It was aligned with a lot of things that I've been reading the past couple of years. I don't think that the idea of revolutionary love is just coming through the Sikh or Sikh faith.
Right.
I think I see it so many different places. And so it was very much in alignment with what I've been reading, particularly like oneness and connectivity, and like you're saying, like how you can experience it going internal. It doesn't have to be an external thing.
Yeah. I'm going to play just a couple clips again from this interview she does where she talks about, she sort of lays it out, defines what revolutionary love means.
And also one thing, if you have any questions or comments, you just want to holler at us.
Yes,
we go.
please.
I just didn't want to forget this. The slide before, you referred to putting on the armor, or maybe it was even before that. Anyway, putting on the armor of love or the armor of faith. It's an interesting thing. In our faith tradition, we look and sort of dress like everybody else. And I'm always amazed, especially in this time of persecution and anger towards people of other faith, like to be in the airport and you see a Hasidic Jew, they have their hat on, and they've got the robes and stuff. I mean, they're very quick and easily identified, and they're brave. I would call it brave to wear the symbols of their faith, and that's just one example. There are others, monks and their orange robes or whatever, and it's just an interesting thing. So literally putting on the armor of your faith, how you dress. I mean, the Jewish people that wear, the men that wear the yarmulkes and whatever. So I don't know. How do we look or be different? What is the armor of our faith? Maybe it's very amorphous kindness or something like that. But anyway, I just thought.
No, yeah, Jim.
It was interesting, she said that you're one with everybody. And then the Bible verse you put up there said you're against the evil one. And I wonder, does she indicate in any way what is the evil that you go against, or the evil one? How do you judge someone to be not one with everybody else, someone who is the evil one that you're against?
Well, and I think that's where she's leading us to, right, is that we're not really against. And that's kind of where this is going to move through. Yeah, go.
One thing that I thought was interesting, Jim, that they don't have a heaven or hell. The sick. There's no heaven or hell. It's all, you go back to the one. So that was definitely a big difference between that faith and our faith.
Right.
I think it would be interesting to ask her that question, like, is there an evil one? Like, when there were these emperors that were trying to eliminate their faith, like, was that an evil one? Or I think a lot of times the gurus didn't saw them as one with themselves and gave themselves their lives to the emperors.
Absolutely.
So, to me, this is a fascinating conversation, and just a couple of thoughts related. I love that you said her vision of love is so aligned with a lot of things we've read, and I would say there are actually relatively new Christian books that have titles of something like Revolutionary Love, and I think our picture of love has been watered down and domesticated to such a degree that it just blends in with the background. And I think, my impression is, and I hear this of people that get angry at their pastors for actually describing the kind of love Jesus had for everyone, and they're like, "Whoa, no, we're not. Where'd you get that?
Right.
Who gave you that talking point?" Right. So it's kind of the love Jesus taught is pretty revolutionary.
It is, and we're going to hit on some of that because I think that's really the important image. Is the evil one to me? It's sort of not a person. It's I think she's talking about this notion of that when it manifests in people. And she'll talk about that, how it usually manifests from a place of hurt or fear or prejudice that you have to try to see in that person.
Yeah, and to that point, and Jim's point about the evil one, I just watched the podcast with Rainn Wilson this morning, so it's fresh in my mind. But she also refers to them as wounded, as, you know,
Yeah.
that they are, like you said, coming from a place of hurt, but a wounded one. So
Yes.
it seems to be the way she separates it out as still keeping it within the oneness, but that person is wounded.
Right, that's right. And that's why I kind of think of this concept more of like a darkness, you know, this looming thing that can be taken on when people are broken and hurting. So this is another from her podcast with Rainn Wilson, her description of this notion of revolutionary love.
Revolutionary love is the choice to enter into labor for others, for our opponents, for ourselves, to transform the world around us. And it took me a long time to come to this way of inviting people into love, precisely because what you have named. I grew up in this tradition where my grandfather taught me to love like a warrior, that love wasn't a placebo or a rush to forgive or a rush to reconcile while leaving injustices unaddressed. Like love, the kind of love my ancestors gave me, my grandfather gave me, was muscular and robust, radical, ultimately revolutionary. Like, if we're all part of the one, and no one's outside of our circle of care, that means there are no such thing as monsters in this world. Only human beings who are wounded. Who have forgotten the one. And so it's up to us to decide whether we want to surrender our humanity and choose to, see them as enemies, or if we choose to see the wound in them and return to this foundational truth. There's no one outside of our circle of care, not even you. I mean, that's hard, courageous work. And
so that's her, definition of this revolutionary love. It's up to us to decide. Do we want to surrender our humanity, choose to see others as enemies, or choose to see the wound in them and return to the foundational truth that there's no one outside of our circle of care, not even ourselves. You're giving ourselves the grace and love to know that, we're broken too in places. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this. I think this notion of, she talks about this with Reverend Jackie Lewis, the beloved community that is ultimately our destination. And there are so many things right now that we're tripping over, right? I mean, on the way there. The bridges are burning, literally, to this place. But if we can think of it as, she talks about, we're different voices, different sounds, different languages, we come from different places, but we're all singing the same song. I mean, ultimately, we're all wanting the same thing. And it's not new. It's been going on for thousands and thousands of years, and it will go on for thousands and thousands more. But if we can hear ourselves in each other's stories and find ways to build community, and remember that love it's a wellspring for all of us to drink from. It's available to everybody. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter what your faith tradition is. It doesn't matter whether you even have one. We are all open and available to be loved. It's a labor that can be taught, and it can be modeled, and it can be practiced. It is an act. It is an action. It's not just a feeling. It is a choice. And it is the bridge to this beloved community. So, going back to what Sam was saying, in our faith tradition, we are taught this radical love. I mean, Jesus Christ, who we are modeled after, he did not sit back and say, just wait, just associate with people who are just like you, who think just like you. No, he said, first of all, and look at Paul. I mean, so we come in Romans, let love be genuine, hate what is evil, hold fast what is good, love one another with mutual affection, outdo one another in showing honor, do not lag in zeal, be ardent in spirit, serve the Lord, rejoice in hope, Be patient in affliction, persevere in prayer, contribute to the needs of the saints, pursue hospitality to strangers. Bless those who persecute you, bless and do not curse them. Rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be arrogant, but associate with the lowly. Do not claim to be wiser than they are. Do not repay anyone evil for evil. Do not repay anyone evil for evil. How many times would I like that to be preached from some pulpits these days? Take thought for what is noble in the sight of all. If it's possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Yeah.
A couple of slides ago, when you said that we're all singing the same song or something like that. There was a book, when my children were teenagers and stuff, I was real involved with the youth programs here at Trinity. And there was this book, and I can't even think of the name of the author, but I think it was actually, my children went to Pace, but I think that Westminster used this book in one of their religion teachings. But it was just a paperback book, and it was sort of a thumbnail sketch of all of the various world religions. Taoism, Christianity, Judaism. I don't recall, but there probably were some Islamic faiths and some Hindu faiths and on and on. But the prologue to the book said, rather than think of ourselves as different, and they do it one way, and we can poke holes in their way, and we do it our way, and all that, think of us all being a part of the symphony to God. There is the violin section, they're playing their part, the violas, the cellos, the brass over here, the drums, and all of it together makes a beautiful symphony to God. And you take away the violins, and the symphony does not sound as good. I don't know, for some reason, I love that metaphor of we are all a part of the symphony of this world, and we all have our part to play in it. And, so I don't know.
No, I love that.
Out there.
Thank you for sharing that. Someone else, lastly.
I'm trying to bring this down to earth for people like me who need real stories and humans. One of the things about the protest marches yesterday and the organizers, for all the threats that have been made to them, that the Department of Justice is going to go after them because, and they call them names that are ridiculous.
Sure.
They were putting out a lot of messages about how to peacefully march. And it was very little about how to protect yourself, and it was very much about protect the peace and the goodness and the goodwill and the humanity. In other words, show, don't tell. And there was a lot of that yesterday. Now, here's the other thing. People at those marches are relatively the same in their ways of thinking. And so I think where we are now is how do we talk to people who are not there? And I don't want to say we're there and they're not. I don't mean that. But I just mean we're not in the same place. Yes. And I think trying to figure out how and why that is.
And I think the truth is too, it's people that, and this is something we're getting into also, but it's not the people that used to be the strangers in my life right now are people I should know well. The ones that are in my family and friend group, or people that have changed or shifted, that I'm finding myself, and we'll talk about that. Yeah, and I think it is like it feels very us, them, and it's not necessarily that we're coming at it from this totally foreign place. From a lot of the patterns and things in our lives have been very similar.
Can you go the one slide back?
I can.
So, second paragraph starting at verse 14 said, "Bless those who persecute you, bless and do not curse them." So I was a Southern Studies, American Studies major in college, and in the Southern Studies part, I try to always think about, okay, our history, our way of being, our way of talking, and putting it simply, what that really is, what that great Southern mama particularly phrase is bless his heart. When somebody's just a total jerk, or
Right,
evil or something.
right.
Bless his heart. He can't help himself, but maybe he can. And maybe I can help love him to do that.
Right? No, that's great.
This verse, where it says, if it is possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all, reminded me of Justice Sean Ellen LaGrua's approach, where you, if it's possible, as so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. So she didn't, it's not a love everybody, it's a love as best you can, but there's a limit, and the limits are set by Tom Jones, DA. He would be much harsher in judging than she would. She would try to bring it down. I'm sure Tom has a heart, but he is a prosecutor. but this really describes her approach, which I thought really fits well with what you're talking about today.
Yes, no, I agree. Any other thoughts? So this really is just a reflection of, in our word, where this love, love is the, above all, maintain constant love for one another. Love covers a multitude of sins. Be hospitable to one another without complaining. Serve one another with whatever gift each of you has received. Let mutual love continue. Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing that, some have entertained angels without knowing it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. How many times do we see this?
Yeah, and we were talking earlier in the week, we were going through this. Libby's much better at this kind of stuff than I am when he's talking about it publicly. But my brain immediately goes to school and textbooks and literature. And we're teaching the Odyssey right now, or I'm trying to teach the Odyssey. And one of the main concepts is this idea of, I think it's pronounced xenia, and it's just the idea of the cultural value of hospitality. And in the Odyssey, there's moment after moment after moment of characters just inviting people in. A stranger shows up at the door, and they have this lavish meal, and I tell my students, I say, think about fancy meals, how long they last, like an hour, hour and a half. And only after they're done eating and drinking the wine and everything do they say, who are you? What do you want? How can we help you? And so I look at this, and I like the thread, the continuity through all these different cultures that we see Christianity. And this is, Greek mythology, and which makes it more real for me. And I like trying to create that thread and bring it through Greek mythology, Valarie Kaur, the Bible, everything. It's just, that was one thought that popped up in my brain this week as we were talking about it.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, this Greek mythology stuff is good.
And I think she hits on this, that love, in order to bring about change in our world, in our community, and in everything, is, it's rooted in love.
We are now witnessing the costs of running only on the fumes of hostility. We are seeing how we are starting to become what we are fighting against. We are seeing how many of us are opting out, getting sick, burning out, taking our lives. If our movement is loveless, then it is not sustainable. And so when I say revolutionary love is the choice to enter into labor for others, okay, that's forms of solidarity, so the left is, for our opponents, that means, can you fight them without refusing to surrender your humanity or theirs? And for ourselves, that means, can we love ourselves enough, love each other enough, to keep breathing as we're pushing in the labor? For those of us who are able to, who have the ability to live into it where we are, it might mean picking up the phone and calling that friend or that relative or that cousin. It might mean setting the table and inviting people over and having this conversation rooted in like what hurts. These little ways that seem, they're not small. Like, they are everything. They are the seeds for what we eventually want to grow. And if no one's planting them now, nothing will grow then. For those of us who are able.
So, finding solidarity, this concept of hospitality, we started thinking about, we're coming upon a time where, for a lot of us, we're going to see family we don't see all the time. We come towards Thanksgiving, Christmas, other holiday times. And she's talking about, picking up the phone and talking to people, how we're burning out, and we're finding ourselves turning into the very things sometimes in some ways that we are rejecting and others. So trying to see each other's wounded places, acknowledging that we've been part of causing those wounds and hurting each other, and remembering to heal ourselves, we need to be responsible for each other's hearts. Deep solidarity is rooted in love. Recognize that our movements are only as strong as our ability to love one another, and that loving one another is only as deep as our ability to grieve with one another. So I would ask you, this was something Sam and Lane were going to touch on some last week and didn't get the chance. I'd love for us to talk about, or people share, who are the strangers in our midst today? Who in our world do we need to be loving better, loving differently? Anybody have any thoughts on?
To kind of tag on this, and then with what Leslie said, I think Leslie hit something that's been on my mind a lot, is the how to engage in conversation with people who, like you said yesterday at the marches, a lot of like-mindedness there. We all have, and I'm not saying everybody in this room would have been on a march yesterday, so but I struggle with how to engage in those conversations to build the bridges. And I'm someone that prides myself on being a good communicator. My whole career has been based on that. And yet, the strangers that are in my closest circles, my family, extended family, friends that I've known my entire adult life, to kind of get to a point where I feel like I have to say, I better not go there. That's going to cause some discord. Oh, that's going to change the dynamic of the whole room. And how do I know that? Because I have experienced it more than once. And I don't run to those opportunities. I don't look for a good debate. And so I read this, listen to her podcast and read this and go, yeah. And yet it is really hard. It would probably be easier for me to have these conversations with people who I'm not close to than the people that I feel like there's so much at risk. If I say something, if it doesn't come out the right way, if it ends abruptly, wow, what might I risk there? And so I'm not proud of that, but often I just stay silent. And I'm not the silent type, but I stay silent on social media. I say, maybe I won't enter into that conversation to keep the peace, to keep these relationships going. So I think this is where we are. I mean, I really do. I think to have this revolutionary love with the strangers who are not really strangers in another state, strangers in another part of the city, they are strangers in our world, in our personal relationships. So if anybody wants to have a little chat about that, I would sign up for that.
I think
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's, for me, as I think through this, and it's been echoed for years, like I think of Brian Stevenson when he came, and one of his examples was get proximate, like the idea of getting close. I think people genuinely, across faiths, communities, nations, socioeconomic factors, are good and know how to love. We just know how to do it, but we have gotten so good at building barriers, whether it's the news station that you choose to watch, or the communities or activities that you do. But in our family lives, I think it's very easy to hide behind the barriers that are so easily there. Let's talk about football instead of what's on the news. Let's talk about what our kids are doing and what vacation you just had versus something much harder. And so it's not necessarily the loving part that I find hard. It's the breaking down of barriers, and almost like Ellen Marshall said, of just opening up and trying to get back to the point of, I'm interested in you and what you think. I disagree, I believe, most heartily in whatever it is that we might talk about, but I want to connect with you on it. And that's incredibly hard, and it's almost harder with people close to us than not. But I think the stranger part's the most important thing, is the moment you can no longer say stranger. Like, this is no longer a stranger, it's Bob or Juan or, you know, whoever it is that's sitting across from you, like in the Odyssey, and you've had dinner with, and you get to know who they are as a people. It's very easy to then love them, but you have to do the work to get through the barriers that we are continuing to build in our society,
Right.
more so than ever.
And I think that's, you know, where can we plant seeds of what we want to sow in the world? Like, how can we, and I think that a lot of it is seeing that wound in others, trying to understand. I mean, I've been vindicated by this, honestly, because like going to a march or surrounding myself with people who I know are fighting for the same things I am, that's the easy part. But like trying to sit down and understand why someone might have a point of view that I just cannot wrap my head around, that's really hard for me. And I'm not making good time. I don't find myself making time for that like I should. I do find myself feeling like putting up a wall. Like I'm not trying to see the wound in them. And so I would ask us, like, where do we start to plant those seeds? You know, because maybe it is among, when we see these changes and people getting up and standing up, which we desperately need. But then rather than just, you know, sort of staying quiet with those who are having these points of view that really we're having such a hard time with, how do we start to have that conversation? And so thinking about coming, you know, Thanksgiving. It says Thanksgiving is politically incorrect. Turkey is politically incorrect. Yams with marshmallow fluff are politically incorrect and disgusting.
There's one of my favorite writers. One of my favorite writers is a guy named Steve Allman, and he writes a lot about humor. And we were talking about this week, and one of the upsides of all the bad stuff in the world is that Steve Allman says, oftentimes tragedy and just negative thinking and negative thought is the midwife to comedy. And so I love that humor. New Yorker cartoons are they're kind of my bread and butter and in my brain anyway. And so we picked these because they sort of speak to what we're
this
talking
one, and
about.
I know you want to comment on this one.
Yeah, so I love this one because, so this is I think it was 2000.
You read what the t-shirt, you'll have to read what the
Yeah, it was 2015, and so she's got her little handbag has a Hillary sticker, and he's got the Trump hat on, but they're both wearing the exact same shirt. It says, "I survived talking politics at Thanksgiving." But it also, it sort of illustrates this notion of, you know, we're strangers to people we know, and they have an opinion, we have an opinion. I'm right, they're wrong, and they're thinking I'm right, they're wrong, you know. But this to me was absolutely perfect, because the guy with the red hat, he believes what he believes, and he believes he's right, and she believes, but they came from places where they were in strife, and there was this tension, and they had to, but they made it. They made it through. And Christmas is around the corner.
Go. Sorry.
This is such a wonderful conversation. I hope it continues well. I think Valerie's going to help us the day after talk about how do we take steps in this direction. But two things I love is the passage you mentioned, Libby, in Ephesians about, you know, spiritual warfare, and you get a little nervous when we have a lot of people that want to take Christian militarism very seriously. So you go, but I love the fact that he said, according sort of to Russ's comment, our battle is not against flesh and blood, you know? And so instead of trying to define, well, who are the evil parties here? Well, whatever our battle is, it's not against any flesh and blood.
That's right.
So I do love that. And I do love to the proximity thing, cheating a little bit and going to her book where she says, look, you don't have to feel love you don't have to feel anything, people, to love them. And she suggests, get proximate in people's pain. She said, who in your community that you maybe don't even know, but there's been pain, there's been tragedy, there's some public observance, go and be with them. Be proximate in their grief, and you will absolutely find that you get to hear stories that you haven't heard and begin to have an entirely different relationship with somebody that was a stranger. And so I wonder, even at the Thanksgiving table or whatever, how do we move toward people, whoever they are, in their grief? And that gives us a chance to hear a story that we haven't heard, and then we're maybe taking some steps in a good direction.
Well, two things struck me about this conversation. One, I remember at Westminster, when we tried to have a good conversation about ideas, that we had to tell the kids, you don't have to win. This is not about winning. This is about putting yourself out there and your point. And I think that's one of the best things we can say about the hard conversations, is that you sort of just share yourself and maybe even your wounds, to just let them respond. Don't feel like you have to take over. And the second thing I want everybody to notice when we listen to Valarie, and if we read her book and listen to her TED Talks, she is amazing at bringing together all the best voices. I mean, we've got Brian Stevenson, and we've got Jesus, we've got the sick, voices, and it seems like there really is a lot in the ether out there on all these different planes that's the same. I mean, that it's really good. And so maybe we're the ones who are falling away from the message that, in terms of religion at least, most religions are pretty darn, when it comes to the very depth of them, they're pretty similar in their messages. Yes, there are outliers. I mean, I remember when, what's ISIS, when that was, or maybe Hamas. I mean, these groups that seem to be totally fixed on violence. But there's so much more of the other, and I think that's something to think about.
Well, and to follow up on that, like you said the word ISIS or whatever, it's interesting, and up there, don't sit a Republican by a Democrat, by a Republican and all that. Well, we get these labels, and unfortunately these labels bring all kinds of stuff, So if somebody says, I am a so-and-so, all of the baggage associated with that thing, whatever. And we are a bad habit in our society to prejudge. Oh, well, my goodness, they are identifying themselves as that. Well, they must be X, Y, and Z as well. And I think, to your point, rather than say, I'm a Republican, why don't you say, I am a mother with 3 children, right? Who wants to argue with that? And let me tell you about my kids. And then over the course of time, maybe you hear some of my values, and then at the very end of the thing, well, how do you identify politically? And it sounds a whole lot different, maybe, hopefully, than let me just tell you who I am, whatever.
I think there are a couple of things that I learned as a lawyer that are helpful in dealing with other people, is don't argue out of anger. Don't let anger be the way you express yourself in court if you're doing an oral argument. And don't try to talk when the other person is talking. Listen to the other person. Let them finish. When you have a family gathering at Thanksgiving, when it goes south is when everybody's talking at the same time or talking in a loud, angry voice. And I think the other thing you learn is that if you're opposing another lawyer, that person may be your best friend, and you don't have to see the other person as an enemy. If you see them as a colleague, as a friend, as somebody who's got the other side, that's their job, you've got your side. If you just have those concepts in mind that, that this person I'm